Hello demons of all sorts, and welcome to another Hazbin Hotel video. This time we're diving into a theory that's been cooking in my head for a while now and is finally ready to be served hot and fresh. It's a bit long, which is why this video will be a two-parter, and within these two parts we are going to form a master theory to answer the big questions currently on the minds of most Hellaverse fans. Like, what are Rosie's plans? Why is Lilith in heaven? What happened between her and Lucifer? Why did Alastor disappear at the same time as her? And where does Rue come into all this? In this part, we'll be covering Rosie, a bit of Lilith, and most importantly, Rue. I'll go over who Rue is, what we know about her, respond to a popular fan theory that I disagree with, and finally explain my own theory as to who she is and what she's doing. Starting with some quick context for you newbies, Rue is a character who's been confirmed to exist in the past and present of the Hellaverse in a few different places, and is generally acknowledged as the large, overarching villain of the story. As far back as 2019, in a now-deleted Twitter post, Vivian Madrano shared a drawing of a woman dressed in red and black with plaid patterns on her design, a wide-brimmed fedora, and a red drink in her hand. At the top of the image are the words, "She's waiting." She said it would be a long time before we actually saw this character in the show, but that she was a looming threat in the distance, strongly indicating her in an antagonistic role. She also said that this character, Rue, aka the root of evil, was a personification of evil and worse than any other characters in the show, including Valentino. There's another old drawing showing her with her mouth open as her tongue turns into this eldritch abomination filled with eyes. If you look closely, you can see chains near the bottom of the drawing seemingly holding her down by her neck and arms. Both drawings also show her with blood dripping from her mouth. I can't source all of this because many of the posts are deleted, but you can check the description for the sources I do have. Anyways, more recently, VivziePop made a couple of posts on social media confirming that Rue is still canon, like a post expressing excitement about finally getting to record lines for her. We don't know how much of the old stuff about Rue still stands, but it's kind of all we got. We see a figure who is most likely supposed to be Rue in the intro sequence when Charlie mentions evil.
And shielded all from evil.
She's got a similar hair thing going on and the overall black aesthetic with the red eyes. It's also generally accepted by fans of the show that Rue and Eve are the same person, the root of evil. Or rather, that Rue is what Eve became after eating the apple. That is what the animation makes it look like, giving her the same black and red aesthetic and immediately shifting to imagery of these black claws and eyes everywhere, both of which are associated with Rue. It's also widely believed for this reason that Rue can control the eyes we see all over Hell. Also, she was mentioned once in Hell of a Boss.
May the root of evil remain honored as we continue thy work!
Okay, now that the context is out of the way, we can get into the fun part. There's this theory first made by A. Lamau after the release of Season 1 that's gained increased popularity since the debut of Season 2. The theory goes that this Lilith we see in heaven is actually Rue disguised as Lilith, and the real Lilith is actually Rosie. Basically, according to this theory, at some point during the Morningstar's lives together, Rue took Lilith's place, assumed her identity, and forced her out of the picture. Lilith had little choice but to take on a new identity, forming her Rosie persona, until she could defeat Rue and return to her true self. This theory would explain a few things, like why Lilith suddenly wanted to isolate Charlie from Lucifer, or why Rosie acts almost motherly to Charlie and encourages her to sing. Post Season 2, most people can agree that there is more going on with Rosie than meets the eye, but I don't quite agree with the prominent theory. Instead, here's what I think. Rue is actually Rosie, and the Lilith we see here is real. Before I explain why, let's go over some issues I have with the Rosie is Lilith theory. I shouldn't have to say this, but no hate is intended on A. Lamau or anyone. In a nutshell, it feels out of character for both Lilith and Rue. If Rosie is actually Lilith, trying to help her daughter, why would she take such pleasure in controlling another soul? Lilith's whole thing is independence and free will, and here she is controlling somebody else? Engaging in the very behavior she once rebelled against? Making Lilith a hypocrite isn't a problem on its own, but doing so and trying to make her seem like the same loving mother and independent queen we see in the prologue would be inconsistent. I can imagine Lilith owning someone else's soul out of necessity, if Alastor were just too dangerous to be let free, or if she needed to use him in order to defeat Rue. But Rosie doesn't just do what she needs to keep Al on her leash. She doesn't keep him in a gilded cage. She controls his every move. She actively takes pleasure in tormenting him. Rosie's behavior is not consistent with the genuine Lilith. And if Lilith is doing all this to be manipulative, why is she taking a disguise at all? She would wield more power as herself than as Rosie. I've seen people point out that Rosie isn't as mean as she could be in Don't You Forget. That she's surprisingly chill. But I think those people are kind of missing the point of the scene. Rosie is the kind of person who will rip your heart out and crush it in her hands, smiling at you all the while. Remind you of anyone? Rosie and Alastor are actually incredibly similar in this way. Both are master manipulators, both use jokes and theatrics to remind their victims of how powerless they are, both have pretty good self-control and rarely get angry unless they're attempting to bully their victim back into submission. Alastor threatens Husk in Dad Be Dad because Husk brought up Alastor's own soul deal, something he's sensitive about. To Al, that's a sign that Husk needs a reminder of his place. Rosie, on the other hand, doesn't care that Alastor wants his freedom, or that he's getting tired of doing tasks for her. What does she care? As far as she knows, he's not gonna get his freedom without listening to her, so what reason does she have to feel worried? She doesn't have to do anything for him. He can bitch about his staff all he wants, she still doesn't have to fix it. She gets angry when he truly obtains his freedom, but it's more short-lived because they have bigger issues in the moment. She may not be making direct threats, but she is stripping Al of as much freedom as possible, telling him that the moves he makes are hers alone, and constantly comparing him to a caged animal. There are many words to imply that someone has to do what you say without actively comparing them to an animal. Servant, minion, helper, puppet. Those terms aren't great, but they're less insulting than pet. Yet the chorus is her telling him to sit, stay, roll over, go fetch, play ball, or play dead at her behest. She even makes him sing along just to add insult to injury, as well as suggesting that they've done this before. None of this feels in character for Lilith. Lilith lifted her people up. Rosie puts her subject down. I just cannot see a world where Lilith is trying to help her daughter and her kingdom, which is what this theory would imply, while also acting like this behind closed doors. Then there's a far bigger inconsistency with this theory. It's out of character for Rue. If it is true and this woman on the beach really is Rue in disguise, then why is she just chilling on a beach in heaven? I can see why Lilith might want a break from hell. She's human. Wanting a break from stress and hardship is a very human motivation. I don't think that's actually why she's there, which we'll get to, but it's a sensible motivation for a human person to have. Rue? Well, she might have once been sort of human, but now she's a personification of evil. From what little we know about her, she seems like a master puppeteer, pulling strings from behind the scenes, every move she makes part of some grand plan. I can only imagine she would want to be close to where her power is strongest. Hell, the realm of evil. Why the hell would an antagonist of Rue's status be content to just chill on a beach in solitude? In a series full of eccentric antagonists who actively seek power over others and enjoy causing pain, it feels weird to have the worst one of all just content with peace of mind. It could be, but I think it makes more sense for her to be actively hurtful. The only reason I can think of why Rue would go to heaven would be to manipulate Charlie and Lucifer by making them think Lilith abandoned them. But the Lilith we see here isn't scheming, nor would she need to be in heaven to suddenly go missing and elicit the same reactions. Then there's how Charlie turned out. This theory relies on the assumption that Rue took Lilith's place long before her disappearance, since Rosie has obviously been ruling Cannibal Town for longer than 7 years, meaning Rue raised Charlie for some amount of time, most likely isolating her from her father in order to mold her into the perfect puppet. Cool beans. But then, why did Charlie turn out the way she did? Lilith raised a woman who never gave up, who could pick herself up no matter how many times she fell, who would do anything for her people, who, yes, has a hole in her heart from her mother's abandonment, distance, and lack of advice, but still built a life for herself and is by no means dependent on mom's approval to continue doing so. These aren't the actions of a perfect monster making all the right moves to manipulate people she sees as chess pieces. Rather, those of a complicated, flawed woman trying her best under difficult circumstances. One last detail, I've noticed people bring up Lilith's eyes and the fact that we don't see her eyes outside of background pictures as further evidence for this theory, which does make sense when you think about it. Often in fictional stories, when a character takes the form of another, the eyes are the only thing that remain consistent. It's a noticeable enough detail that the audience can pick up on it, while also being subtle enough that we can suspend our disbelief and imagine that the characters wouldn't pick up on it, but I think the real reason her eyes are hidden is much simpler. They would betray her true emotions. The writers are obviously trying to keep Lilith's feelings a secret right now. Concealing her eyes is one of the most effective ways to do that. They're called the windows to the soul for a reason. It means we can't tell if she's worried or angry, disappointed or relieved, sorrowful or cold. Also, for what it's worth, in pictures from both Charlie's early childhood and well into her teen years, Lilith has the same lilac-colored eyes. So I don't think she'd have a different eye color now, even if she were Rue. Alright, now that we've dissected the prominent theory, let's get into what I actually think. I'm far from the only person to suggest this, but I wanted to lay out all the evidence. I think Rosie is Rue in disguise. Not only would it explain the issues with the previous theory, but as we said, there is clearly more going on with Rosie than meets the eye. For one, she and Zestial are the only overlords to stay out of Vox's rebellion. I would quickly raise an eyebrow at her telling Alastor she could make him the most powerful sinner in hell. Because what authority does she have to do that unless she herself is the most powerful sinner, or even stronger? That would be like Valentino saying he could make you the king of hell. Like, okay, Chief, with what power? She would have to be more powerful than what she gave Alastor to have granted him that power in the first place. She can't pass on power she doesn't have. Also, in the same scene, she calls Alastor a mortal soul, which kind of reminds me of how Adam called him a mortal soul. Clearly, sinners count as mortal souls, but Rosie is implying here that she isn't one. And it's not like she could be hellborn, not when she looks so similar to a whole group of sinners. Side note, VivziePop has confirmed that the cannibals in Cannibal Town are sinners, not hellborn, but didn't say anything about Rosie specifically. Since Rue obviously pre-existed humanity, she can't fully be a sinner by technicality, even if she's attached to a human soul. I also think Rosie contacting the living world is interesting. Some people have suggested that this is all Alastor's doing, that he just created a signal strong enough to get through to the other side. But something about that seems off? The whole thing about being a sinner is that you can't influence the living world no matter what. You're dead. It's over. That's your punishment. That's why people pay IMP to go to Earth for them. And Alastor doesn't have his powers yet. So, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that he just Ouija-boarded his way into contacting hell. There must be something more going on here. So we've established that Rosie is more than she seems, and may not be a sinner. But how do we know she's Rue specifically? Well, for starters, there are her powers. Or, more accurately, Alastor's powers. You'll notice from the aforementioned eldritch monster that Rue's motifs include black limbs with large hands and sharp claws that appear eerily similar to some of Alastor's powers. Don't forget that Alastor got his powers from Rosie. Then there are Rosie's own powers, which, wouldn't you know it, have this same style. You may notice that her powers are golden, and if she's Rue, there's actually a perfect canon reason for this. She got her powers from something created by angels. The apple. While not all angels have golden magic, it's obviously a color associated with heaven. And that's not the only heavenly thing about her powers. We also see her teleporting with these light puffs of magic just like Lucifer does. And it makes sense when you think about it that she would have angelic power or an equivalent to it, since it is so much more potent than demonic power and thus a very easy way to make her a profound threat. At this point, you may be wondering what stops Rosie from being a fallen angel. I will admit that is a potent theory. Her being Rue is more likely for reasons I'm about to explain, but her being a fallen angel, maybe even this angel, seems like the second likeliest possibility. And I know many fans are used to the idea of Rue's powers being red, but we don't actually see her powers in action in these pictures, aside from this thing, which has several colors. And there's no reason why someone as powerful as Rue wouldn't be able to choose or change the color of their magic to, say, throw people off her trail. Especially if she was powerful enough to create this whole Rosie persona at all. Speaking of the Rosie mask, it makes sense that Rue, aka Eve, would take on this sweet, demure persona in an attempt to gain the trust of others. Think about her matchmaking and relationship counseling business, how compassionate she is towards Charlie, how formal and ladylike she acts, and how she basically admits in Don't You Forget that this is all a mask, calling herself an honest woman always there to lend an ear immediately before fucking with Al throughout the song. It really just feels like she's saying, "You'd threaten an honest woman? The woman who owns your soul?" It also makes this line,
Well, who hasn't thought about eating their first husband? I certainly would have if he didn't taste so bad.
really hilarious in context. Obviously, Eve's soft attitude wasn't a lie initially, but once she became Rue, they could both use Eve's personality to their advantage because they were one in the same. As a bonus, it also makes Alastor suffer even more, showing him how his faith in women and his understanding of them as these soft, docile creatures ended up biting him in the ass. Rue's appearance also has a few nods to Rosie, with a similar wide-brim fedora and a lust for blood, because let's be real, this drink is probably blood. As one last little nail in the coffin, in Hear My Hope, she calls Alastor a snake with clear disdain in her voice, which definitely feels like a nod to Eve being mad at the snake who told her to eat the apple. Alright, so we've established that at some point, Rue took on this Rosie persona to manipulate others. But why? What does she want? For that information, we're gonna have to go back to season 1, when Rosie forms a bond with Charlie. After helping Charlie with a relationship and building her confidence, Rosie watches her sing Ready for This, a song about Charlie forming her own identity as a ruler. Alastor remarks how her potential could be used for his own gain, and Rosie agrees. One small but voluminous detail is that Charlie starts the song holding Alastor's staff, to use as both a microphone and a token of leadership, but as she gains confidence, this is replaced with Rosie's scepter. The other thing you'll notice is that this song isn't really Charlie's victory. The cannibals agree to help because Alastor promises them flesh. There's some character development for Charlie as Susan stops undermining her, but they only agree to help because of what Alastor said. Even the singing, the part of the scene that is truly Charlie's own, didn't work because of anything she did. Rosie doesn't say some sappy shit like, "Darling, you've grown so much, embrace who you are and they'll see it." She says, "They'll listen if you sing. It'll work here."
It will work here. Trust me.
According to old live streams, the cannibals eat you on sight unless you have inside protection and or adopt their mannerisms, which apparently, according to Viv, includes bursting into a 1910-style song, at which point they'll ignore basic logic and accept you as one of them. Ready for This may not be quite 1910 style, but it isn't far off. Basically, Rosie is implying that singing will work because of a specific quirk of Cannibal Town and their ant colony behavior, not because it's a sign of Charlie's growth. Rosie and Alastor use this scene to manipulate Charlie by creating something that looks like her success, but is actually fully dependent on them, all while appearing supportive so Charlie trusts them for advice and guidance in the future. A dynamic that's implied to have worked for Rosie when we see that Charlie still has her business card. Despite the point of the song, it's clear that Charlie hasn't really come into her own yet. Even in the season 2 finale, her accomplishments are spearheaded by Emily. It was Emily's idea to save the sinners in the crossfire, which resulted in them trusting the girls and the hotel. Emily started the friendship fireball before Charlie joined in. I'm not saying Charlie isn't essential, but she hasn't taken the lead yet. She isn't acting like a ruler yet, which makes sense considering some of her colossal failures this season. Eventually, Charlie will think back to the only time she really appeared to succeed at coming into her throne, and will once again look to Rosie for help. Which is exactly what Rosie wants. Rue wants to use Charlie to control Hell. It's unclear what that means exactly, but I don't think it's a hot take to suggest that Rue wants complete power over Hell and probably Heaven, and that Charlie could be an extremely useful tool to serve that goal. One of the old doodles of Rue shows her with chains around her neck and arms, appearing to be holding her down. Regardless of who chained her down, this apparent limitation of her abilities means that she has to resort to manipulation to get what she wants. These chains don't necessarily mean that she is physically incapable of appearing to our characters or interacting with the story. They just mean that she is being held back somehow. Which would explain the need to take on this whole Rosie persona and use Charlie as an agent for her goals instead of just bulldozing whatever got in her way. It would explain her involvement and concern in the finale. She doesn't want to see Charlie and her friends die because she needs them alive for her plans. It wasn't genuine concern, hence this smile. This is not the face of someone thinking, thank goodness the girl I've grown so fond of isn't about to die. It's the face of someone thinking, there's the potential I saw in this little manipulator all those years ago. It's the face of someone who sees a kindred spirit in Alastor, a skilled manipulator, arranging the chess pieces to suit his needs. This is a knowing smile, impressed at how well he was able to play her game. Outwitting the root of evil isn't easy after all. It may seem out there for a mere sinner, but if anyone can do it, Alastor can. I also think the detail in Ready for This, when Charlie goes from using Alastor's staff to Rosie's scepter, indicates a progression. Like she's using Al as a stepping stone to get close to Charlie, which is probably why she made him go to the hotel in the first place. This part isn't necessary for the overall theory, but still has enough merit behind it that it's worth addressing. If Rosie is Rue, is Eve, that makes the already popular fan theory of Zestial being her son Cain way more interesting. As you probably already know, Cain and Abel are the sons of Adam and Eve, but Cain killed Abel. Since Abel is canon in Hazbin, it only makes sense that Cain would be too. What really set me on this bit of the theory was when Zestial and Rosie were shown to be the only overlords not to get involved in Vox's rebellion. And when a commenter pointed out to me that they both have the same skull symbol on their hats. Like, if they just both had skulls on their hats, I would let it slide, but it's the exact same fucking symbol!
Coincidence? I think not!
They also both have feathers in their hats. The main argument against this theory is that Zestial talks like a man from the 15 to 1600s specifically, not like a human from Eden. Adam and Abel are both shown to talk like they're from the 21st century. But here's the thing with that. Winners in heaven adapt. Because why wouldn't they? Heaven is generally perceived as a safe, welcoming place. There is nothing dangerous about walking the streets of heaven and talking and acting like anyone else. Adam and Abel both develop their own styles of dress based on their interests, but they don't have to commit to the bit because it's all fun and games. Hell is kill or be killed. Cain, like any other sinner, must make himself look intimidating if he wants to survive. Lilith kept her old identity because there's no rule saying sinners have to reinvent themselves, but it does seem like the thing most of them do, usually not even keeping the same names from their lives on Earth. And Cain's great accomplishment of hitting his brother in the head with a rock probably didn't secure him much comfort or safety among arms dealers and cult leaders who eat that shit for breakfast. So in order to survive, or maybe at his mother's behest, Cain adopted this overlord persona that made him look older and scarier and more mysterious than the others, so no one would dare challenge him. He's been around for all of human history, so it's not like it'd be hard to craft a convincing persona from any specific time period. He changed the persona every couple centuries to keep things moderately realistic and so no one was around long enough to catch on, until he reached his Zestial form, where we are today. It may seem far-fetched on paper, but we already know most sinners reinvent themselves in hell, we already know Zestial is notably ancient, and thanks to that damn skull, we already have reason to believe he's connected to Rosie, whom we have very good reason to believe is Rue. If his mother took on this strategy, why wouldn't he? I've seen some Hellaverse fans suggest that we might not ever see Cain in the show, since according to religious text, his punishment was to wander the earth alone, and we don't know if he ever got an afterlife. But that strikes me as the kind of detail writers could easily change. Cain has already been referenced. In an interview, Abel is said not to be the favorite child, and in Hear My Hope, Abel sings that he's not Adam's bravest son. Unless the show explicitly mentions Cain being a wanderer on Earth, the possibility of him being in Hazbin will remain on the minds of many, especially as we dive deeper into Eden, and never addressing it would be underwhelming and easily avoidable. Well, that's about it for part 1 of my huge-ass Hellaverse theory. In summary, Rosie is Rue in disguise. We know this from their designs, how powerful Rosie is indicated to be, and how she demonstrates the intention to control Charlie. With that, let me know what you think in the comments. What is Rue planning? Has she taken a secret form, and have we seen it in the show? Is she Rosie or Lilith or someone else? Can't wait to hear your thoughts. In part 2, we'll go over Lucifer and Lilith's breakup, the Exterminations, the real reason Lilith is in heaven, and finally, Alastor's disappearance. See you then. If I could record just one time without my nose getting unreasonably itchy, that would be wonderful. Hello, demons and angels, welcome back. It's been quite a minute, hasn't it? Okay, I'm done with the Alastor impressions. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're sinking our teeth into the second half of my theory about Rue, Lilith, and their stories. As we plan our descent into madness, the first thing on today's agenda is some Lilith character analysis to try and understand why she broke up with Lucifer and what it can tell us about her overall. Get your tissues, Lucy fans. Though never technically divorced, a line from Charlie in season 1 implies that her parents separated well before Lilith actually left Hell.
After he and Mom split, he never really wanted to see me.
We see a flashback where Lilith takes a very young Charlie out of Lucifer's arms and walks away with her, much to Lucifer's dismay. With how sweet and loving Lucifer is as a father and a husband, it may seem hard to believe that Lilith wasn't a cruel traitor who abandoned them. But before we jump to any conclusions, let's take a deeper look at their joint rulership of Hell and what it can tell us about them. We're gonna take a step back to when Lucifer and Lilith fell, and who they became because of it. It's clear that Lilith openly embraced her identity as a demon, using it as a strength, an empowerment. Whereas Lucifer, well...
Sinners are violent psychopaths, hell-bent on causing as much pain and destruction as they can.
Know what you're planning, but it won't work.
I'm stuck here with all these sinners. Violence and chaos to your doorstep.
Okay, you're garbage. That's why you're in hell.
They are all mega gross and not a single one of them has good taste in musical theater.
We're a failure in life, and you're a failure now, okay?
Things didn't really go as planned for Lucifer. I mean, things didn't go as planned for Lilith either, but she did a much better job adjusting. Lucifer had some responsibilities, like meeting with the sins and, by extension, managing some hellborn affairs, but his heart may not have been in it. Lilith was the one who brought power to their kingdom, the one whose songs inspired their people, the one who thrived while Lucifer lost his ambition. To her, being demons isn't a loss. It's just who they are now, in the same way that hell is their new home. And why mourn being banished from a heaven that was so cruel to them when they can, well, resist? This is obvious even through subtle details, like how Lilith keeps her horns visible while Lucifer chooses to hide his. She gives it a rest in private, but anytime she has a public appearance or is depicted in a portrait or monument, her horns are prominently displayed. The same is not true of her husband, whose demonic traits like his horn, tail, and fully red eyes stay hidden most of the time. These differences make total sense when you think about it. Lucifer is an angel born to worship good. Light is as natural to him as the air he breathes. Despite being an outcast in heaven, he was still created with the same intention to worship good and be all about good and shield the world from evil, which he did. Until the incident. To him, being good and heavenly is just the thing to do, and he can't understand why anyone would think differently, which is probably why he didn't think the apple would have consequences. Of course people would be good if given the choice. Good is, well, it's good. Nowadays, he resents heaven for how they treated him, but still holds on to his prejudices against supposed good and evil, and those who can't meet heaven's standards. In the same way that Vaggie, despite her intentions to help sinners and despite working at what is basically a rehab center, still holds on to her militant attitude and bad impressions of the guests for any single misstep. Season 2 shows a lot of improvement on her part, but the point is, falling doesn't mean unlearning what heaven taught you, and it certainly didn't for Lucifer. Lilith, meanwhile, had very different experiences. She's human. She wasn't created with the intent to revere and worship good, and not only human, but a human thrust into a difficult situation right from the get-go. Lilith quickly learned why it's not always easy to be good. There is no right way to respond to this kind of behavior because people like Adam believe they can do no wrong and will always make it your fault somehow. She saw from early on that doing the right thing is no simple task when you're being treated unfairly, which is why she understands sinners better than Lucifer ever tried to. And I do wonder how he would react if someone pointed out to him that Lilith is also a sinner who failed divine judgment and thus is no better than the rest of hell. Point is, not only does she recognize that their lives are complicated, but since she never saw the good parts of heaven that Lucifer did, she doesn't see anything worth aspiring to. She's quick to ask, what makes heaven so much better to begin with? Which is a pretty valid question considering not even heaven knows the answer. But where Lilith saw the next step in their journey, a kingdom they could grow and thrive in, Lucifer saw his own failures. According to the prologue,
Heaven cast Lucifer and his love into the dark pit he had created, never allowing him to see the good that came from humanity, only the cruel and the wicked. Ashamed, Lucifer lost his will to dream.
For an artist, not being able to create is like death. When you lose your ability to dream, you lose yourself, and that is the kind of thing that can easily spiral into depression. This is implied to have started shortly after their fall, based on Lucifer still wearing his robe. People assume that Lilith leaving him was the cause of his depression, but this seems to be indicating it started long before that. His depression leads to isolation, inaction, and copious amounts of rubber ducks everywhere, which is supported by what we see of present-day Lucy. It's at this point that I want to take a brief detour to talk about Charlie and Lucifer's Season 2 interactions, both to analyze Lucifer a little more, as well as defend Charlie a little bit, because I feel like people tend to forget who the parent here is. While captured, we witness Lucifer being excessively preoccupied with Charlie being mad at him. He's just been captured by a dude who's openly expressed intentions to overthrow heaven, and all he can think about is being silly and how mad Charlie's going to be. This tells me his concerns aren't exactly coming from a rational place. Yes, what Charlie told him here obviously hurt him profoundly, but it's worth wondering how much of that is Charlie's fault, because she did say some unfair things, and how much of it is Lucifer's own issues seeping their way into the interaction. Because what she said to him wasn't that bad. Hurtful, yes, but not earth-shattering. I feel like we've all said worse things to our parents. That is, unless there were certain consequences in your home for speaking honestly. Most parents would see an argument like this as a mere bump in the road that could be solved once their child had some space to calm down, especially if your child's partner is agreeing with you. But between their estrangement, Lucifer's gullibility, and the fact that as an autism-coded character he may have trouble reading between the lines, he doesn't see that. Due to their distance, he's never had a real argument with Charlie, aside from temper tantrums when she was a baby. He's never experienced picking up the pieces after a fight with her and moving on, so he doesn't know better than to assume their bond is broken. And he's not just crying over Charlie. Later, he watches a cartoon about a romance between two ducks that is implied to remind him of him and Lilith. Lucifer didn't just lose his daughter. He lost everything. He's lost whatever relationships he had in heaven. He lost his wife, and now he's lost his kid. Charlie was the only thing keeping him afloat, so thinking he's lost their relationship, even though he hasn't, is enough to pull him under. This isn't just about what Charlie said, it's about what Lucifer heard. Then there's the fact that going behind someone's back trying to help already cost him so much the first time he did it, he probably sees history repeating itself. As the prologue suggests, his understanding that his involvement only ever hurts leads to inaction. For example, despite clearly being upset about the way Vox is tarnishing Charlie's reputation, he can't be convinced to do something until Vaggie compares him to Charlie's other supposed father figure, and his fear of losing their relationship to him changes his mind. Lucifer has a lot of issues here that aren't about Charlie, but influence how he sees their interaction, which, wouldn't you know it, is also true of Charlie. Her hyper-focus on Vox's lies about her hurts their relationship just like how his depression used to. So if I'm understanding many of you correctly, yelling at your dad and saying some mean things to him one time because you're going through some shit is horrible. But isolating yourself from your daughter for several years because you were too depressed to be a parent to her is A-okay. Listen, I've dealt with depression. I understand that this was neither Lucifer's choice nor his intention. He's very well written in this way. But that doesn't change the fact that as her father, it is up to him to put his child first. Otherwise, he's just not being a good dad. And yes, he comes around by the end and makes things right, just like Charlie does. But if it seems like the give and take in their relationship isn't equal, that's probably because it's not supposed to be. It's a parent's job to put his kid first, not the other way around. And about the scene where she ignores his injury to gush with Penchas, A, Lucifer was clearly not in any life-threatening danger. B, she hasn't seen Penchas in months and has gone through multiple types of grief, from thinking he was dead to learning he was alive but she couldn't see him, to finally thinking she would get to see him on the broadcast, to that falling through, to actually seeing him after the danger's passed. Her grief is all over the place, and just because she responds in a very Charlie way doesn't mean she's any less emotional about it. Anyways, I got that out of my system. Back to Lucilith. And more than anything, Charlie expresses only really knowing Lucifer through the fantastical stories he told. We witness a flashback where a very young Charlie sneaks into Lucifer's workshop without making any effort to get his attention. Still, he notices her and offers a hand to her, which Charlie looks both happy and surprised by. He picks her up and tells her grand stories until Lilith comes in and takes her away. In the present day, Charlie leaves a voicemail to Lilith remarking that Lucy isn't so bad. Both of these suggest that Lilith isolated Charlie from her father from the time she was a little girl. And Charlie's surprise at his welcoming attitude implies that he wasn't super involved even before that point. Do you think Lilith might start to worry about her young daughter picking up on some of his bad habits? That she might start to worry about what kind of ruler Charlie would grow up to become if she inherits some of his beliefs? The beliefs of someone who hates sinners? Who has a responsibility to his people and to his daughter that he just doesn't meet? Who can't even accept that he's just as much of a demon as he is an angel? How is Charlie meant to be a strong queen one day if she takes so much after dear old dad? While Lucifer taught her to dream, it seems like Lilith is the one who taught her to never give up, no matter what gets in her way. Hence how every time Charlie regains the confidence she lost, it's through song, which is Lilith's whole thing, like in Ready for This, Easy, and Hear My Hope. Now let's look at this scene from another perspective. Imagine being Lilith here. You come home from an exhausting day of dealing with sinners, being the queen they need you to be, and hoping your husband isn't in too bad of a mental state. You love him, and you know the depression isn't in his control. But this is really getting fucking tiresome. You try to be there for him, but nobody ever asks how your day was. Nobody ever asks how you're doing. You come home to see him playing with your daughter, and you're happy at first, until you see that he's telling her stories about all of his lofty dreams and ideas. You know, the ones that got you both thrown into hell. I can only imagine Lilith's thoughts here would be, how dare you? I take care of our people all day. I teach them to stay strong. I help them build lives for themselves here. I teach our daughter to love these people despite all their wrongdoings. I teach her to resist. And here you are telling her all this kumbaya shit about believing in fantastical dreams while I'm the one who's going to have to teach her to work for those dreams? Are you fucking kidding me, Lucifer? Now do you see why she broke up with him? Regardless of whether it was right, do you see why she did it? Eventually, Lilith dips out to raise Charlie as the heir their people will need and takes care of her solo. It's possible, though not guaranteed, that she never even stopped loving Lucifer, which would explain why they never technically divorced. She was simply angry and did what she believed was necessary for her daughter and her people, raising a strong ruler. As for Charlie and Lucifer's remarks about Lilith ignoring things that don't matter and including themselves in that category, ruling hell and raising a kid are probably not easy to balance on your own. And this is one of those things that we really don't know. But my best guess is that Lilith was doing the best she could in that situation. Because, again, Charlie turned out pretty well despite her faults. I've heard so many people say that they really hope Lilith is complicated and nuanced, that she's not another Stella. And I agree with the sentiment, though I wouldn't be so quick to discredit Stella. We know from interviews that we will see Stella's backstory in future seasons of Hell of a Boss, so I'm not ready to dismiss her as a one-sided bad guy. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see Hell of a Boss parallels with the Morningstar family. The shows don't inherently copy or mirror each other, but they do like to include similar ideas, sometimes with a different perspective or by changing a few things. Take Alastor and Nifty and Blitz and Luna. What if the young adult daughter figure to the cold-blooded murderer who obviously loves her didn't want to be considered his daughter? What if Shaggy, the main pre-established, sexy, opposites attract relationship, was also super into PDA? Hello, Eminem. What if the scorned daughter of a depressed dad who loved her but kind of fucked up as a father just couldn't forgive him the way Charlie forgave Lucifer? What if the toxic relationship heavily involving sex and classist systems was even messier and didn't directly feature a clear-cut line of an abuser and abusee? The parallels keep popping up. A fitting addition to this would be, what if the mother who isolated her daughter from her father, say that 10 times fast, truly loved her and did it not out of cruelty or control, but necessity? We'll circle back to the Morningstars later in the video, but for now, let's answer a different question. Why did the exterminations begin? We, as the audience, are informed multiple times that the exterminations began because hell was overpopulated. But let's take a step back, shall we? As the show went on into its second season, many viewers may have remarked that Heaven themselves never actually mention overpopulation as a reason for exterminating. Adam says it's entertainment. Lute says everyone in hell is an abomination, so it doesn't matter anyway. Sera repeatedly references keeping Heaven safe. Lute is now the only character vehemently defending the exterminations, and her entire argument is basically they killed Adam and they're demon scum. Oh, and what was it she said in episode 7?
The threat Adam warned you about is greater than ever.
For those of you in the cheap seats, she said the threat Adam warned about is greater than ever, in response to Vox's Zoom call threat, strongly indicating that the exterminations were Adam's idea. Post-season 1, most people would agree that Sera was behind it. That is how the prologue made things look. However, while Sera clearly had to agree to the exterminations, which I think is what's being shown here, the way she talks about them makes her seem like a passive observer.
Agreed allowing it.
She even resists calling them exterminations, simply referring to them as the Exorcist's yearly activities. Now yes, this was because of her guilt causing her to distance herself from them, but even when acknowledging how fucked up it was, Sera sings, "How could I trust in a justice so cruel and depraved?" implying that she trusted in what someone else suggested rather than coming to her own conclusions, which is in line with how the speaker describes her arc this season as speaking with her own voice. Because of Lute's line, Adam's complete control over the exorcists, making them all women, training them however he sees fit, and just the fact that it seems way more in character for him than for Sera to suggest something like this, he seems to be at the root of the exterminations. No pun intended. And if we go back to Lut's line regarding warning of a threat, supposedly a threat about some kind of uprising from sinners, things start to fall into place. In a backwards kind of way, the exterminations were about overpopulation, but not the kind where there are too many people and not enough resources. Rather, the kind where there are enough people that united and under the right circumstances, they could pose a threat to heaven. Which makes sense at the end of the day, because if this were really just a hell problem, heaven has no reason to even be getting involved. This has nothing to do with them. Earth has major problems.
Global warming? No, wait, that's Earth's problem.
And they know it, but they only ever get involved on a minor scale, like through the cherubs. Now that I think about it, even hell primarily references extermination in the context of controlling an uprising. Remember how the storybook described it?
And as the numbers of hell grew, so did its power. Threatened by this, heaven made a truly heartless decision.
As the numbers of hell grew, so did its power, which caused heaven to begin the exterminations. Numbers and power are referenced equally here as reasons for exterminating. It's not about there being too many people. It's about the fact that numbers means power means a potential threat. In Hell is Forever, Charlie says that Hell's population is out of control, and while her drawing clearly indicates that she is referring to too many people and not enough space for them, I do wonder where she picked up on that particular phrasing. The only time overpopulation is mentioned in Season 2 is in Vox Populi. When Vox sings, they say Hell's too populated, that's why they exterminate. We got the numbers, we got the thunder, let's annex their real estate. Vox is basically admitting that minus the, minor technical difficulty that sinners can't actually get up there, they have the numbers and motives for an uprising. And in the very next song, Sera admits that she allowed the exterminations to prevent an uprising, and Vox remarks on this admission.
You did it to keep us down.
It seems like the only character who truly bought that the exterminations were about overpopulation in the traditional sense was the most notably naive and optimistic one of the bunch. In Season 1, when trying to defend the exterminations to Emily, Sera tells her that the sinners were uprising. In Season 2, after some powerful introspection, she admits that the exterminations were based on mistaken conceit, and that she was allowing fear to control her decisions. She all but came out and said there was never an uprising, at least not a violent one. Her fear just led her to believe there was. The show never clarifies if Vox was right about Lilith or what she wanted, but given the choice to either trust Vox or trust Charlie, I am trusting Charlie every time. Because Vox doesn't even care if he was right about Lilith. He was just using her reputation. As John Oliver once wisely said about someone completely different, I'm not even sure he knows he's lying. I think he just doesn't care about what the truth is. When you put all this together, it seems pretty clear that Adam started the exterminations and used the threat of Hell's potential uprising to get Sera on board. But why though? Well, it is only in character for Adam to be a spiteful little bitch, so here's how I imagine it going down. After several thousand years in heaven, Adam's life, or afterlife, is stagnant. Boring. He spends his days performing rock gigs, eating ribs, swearing his ass off, and sleeping with women he can't remember the names of the next day. It's awesome. But so routine. It's the same thing day in and day out, and the new arrivals coming up from Earth are lame too, always talking about equality and mutual respect and boring stuff like that. After one particularly annoying day, maybe he's tired or irritated or some chick didn't want to sleep with him, he finds himself thinking, you know who's probably having a really shitty time right now? You know who's probably feeling really stupid for leaving me? Ha! That crazy bitch is probably crying out in pain, burning in hell with her dumb little angel twink. And just like that, he's conjuring up an orb to see what Lilith is up to, just like he did in Welcome to Heaven. We already know this is something he would do, as he implies spying on Charlie and Vaggie earlier in the episode.
Hot as fuck, though.
But when he takes a look down at hell to see how terrible Lilith's life must have turned out, he doesn't quite see what he was expecting. Like him, Lilith has a successful musical career, but her music is more than just fun to listen to. Her songs are felt in the minds and souls of those around her. They inspire and uplift her people, making them feel strong and powerful. Worse yet, she has a loving spouse and a good relationship with her child. Adam can't even remember the last time he spoke to Abel, and God knows Lilith squandered his chances at having a good marriage. Twice. Now, what do you think Adam does next? Does he start to really think about how his actions might have hurt those around him? Does he start to wonder how he would feel if he was treated the way he treats others? Does he accept that his ex has some form of success and it doesn't affect him at all? Of course not! By the next day, he's ranting to Abel or Sera or anyone who will listen about how unfair this is, how she was supposed to be punished. That was the point of sending her down there. How she was supposed to suffer for leaving him and not accepting her place, and instead she's thrived. How the stupid rule-breaking angel got the woman who was supposed to be his. No, he's not insecure, but how could she prefer hell to a life with him? And no, he's not jealous of what she has, but she's so unworthy of that kind of success, of love, of a child. It's so fucking stupid. And she's over there singing, "Be strong and resist," like anyone in heaven would want to. That last part catches Sera's attention. She asks Adam what he means about Lilith's songs, and Adam explains her whole resist vibe. Sera gets nervous and tells Adam this isn't something to joke about. Adam insists he isn't joking and shows her some of Lilith's concerts. But he can also see how uneasy this is making her, and very quickly starts to realize that he might be able to get revenge on Lilith after all. And if you're thinking Adam isn't smart enough for that, well, he was smart enough to blackmail Vaggie with threats of exposing her past, so. Besides, he wouldn't need to be smart. He would just need to prey on existing prejudices. There's already widespread fear about Lucifer in heaven. I wouldn't put it past Adam to do something like this maliciously, but I honestly think it's equally possible that it was an accident. Like, he just ranted to Sera way too much, to the point that he was saying things that just weren't true in his anger. And without the full context, Sera gets a little too jumpy and decides they have to do something about this. Adam suggests extermination, and with no better ideas and fear now running through her, Sera agrees. I've seen a number of complaints that Adam isn't well written because his only reason for exterminating was his own enjoyment. I don't really agree with that. I think he's more of someone who just never learned consequences and never had his selfish behavior corrected. Being an arrogant piece of shit doesn't make him badly written. Also, he's far from the only arrogant piece of shit in this story. Anyway, I don't think Adam was lying when he told Charlie that he loved the Exterminations because he found them fun. But if there was another, deeper reason, like, say, revenge on an ex, he's not gonna go telling her that. He'd never want to admit, let alone to Lilith's daughter, that he was so deeply affected by her success. Besides, he might not be able to tell her, even if he wanted to. Alright, we're finally at the endgame. Why did Lilith leave hell? A lot of you may have seen it coming by now, but here we go. This is actually kind of simple. At some point after Lucifer and Lilith's breakup, Heaven calls a meeting. Despite Lucy's dormancy in public life, they insisted serious and request the presence of both Hell's rulers. We know the exterminations started at the same time Lilith disappeared, and we learned back in Overture that Hellborns have an exemption because of Lucifer, with Lute implying in this same line that without this restriction, the exorcists would have already gone after Charlie.
The only reason you're still here is because Daddy gave you and your Hellborn kind a pardon from an exorcist blade.
But we never learned what Heaven got in return for agreeing to this limitation. I mean, sure, Lucifer can't get involved, but that's a pretty small price to pay on its own. Heaven would not accept such a small concession in exchange for leaving such a large population untouched. Not if they have the power to take so much more. With Charlie safe, Lou doesn't have a reason to get involved anyway. Well, no reason except the one sinner he truly cares for. Lilith. And if I'm right about why the exterminations began at all, there would be one last hanging thread for Sera and Adam. Also Lilith. Sera wouldn't be content to let the Queen continue her work. She's already bringing her people to protest, and with this, they'll have perfectly good reason to take those protests even further. If Adam's whole intent was to ruin Lilith's happiness, it only makes sense that he'd want her out of hell, whether it was just to separate her from her loved ones or if he went to see her during those 7 years. They both want her out of hell. Lilith and Lucifer are horrified, but no matter what they say, the angels refuse to back down. So Lucifer, Lilith, and Adam sign the agreement. Every year, heaven will send down an army. In exchange for the safety of the Hellborns, including Charlie, Lilith will live in solitude in heaven, and Sera allows her to live comfortably since she sees no reason to add insult to injury. This includes cutting off all contact with Hell, so she can't cause a rebellion from a distance when people find out where she is. For the same reason, Lucifer can't tell anyone where Lilith is or why, not even Charlie. And he cannot get involved in the exterminations. Quite the complicated explanation on paper, but I think it makes the most sense with the information we have. In Dad Beat Dad, Charlie said that her father just let the extermination happen, that he just said, "Go ahead and kill everyone," implying that he didn't display much guilt to her or tell her any details from the meeting, which makes sense if he wasn't allowed to tell her the full story. Now you may be wondering, if Lucifer knows Lilith can't contact him, why does he keep calling her? Why does she have 687 missed calls from him on her phone, along with dozens of texts? Well, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty details, the kind of loophole that writers can easily close with just about anything, so we kind of have to guess a little bit. But I think it's perfectly believable that the angels made Lucifer leave the room for part of the meeting, and he never got the full story. Maybe they didn't want his protective husband instincts to kick in. Maybe Adam wanted to rub in Lucifer's face that he stole the girl Lucy stole. Considering his almost obsessive worry that his loved ones are mad at him, as we see with him and Charlie, maybe this text says something like, "Hi, honey. So, are you still mad at me? Are you mad at me? I mean, I know things didn't end well between us, and I'm so sorry. I never thought you'd hate hell so much that you'd just... There's so much I wish I could say to you. It's been 7 years. I didn't think you were this mad at me, but... Whatever I did, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I made you give up on me. I'd do anything to make it right." Well, this text is long. Call me when you're ready to talk again. Or maybe he's calling her knowing that she won't answer because he's just in the habit of hurting himself emotionally. Wouldn't surprise me. Well, that's that. At this point, there's one last hanging thread. The radio demon. Why did he disappear at the same time as Lilith? It's very possible that Lilith and Alastor knew each other and grew close in the years before Lilith's disappearance, maybe even since his arrival in Hell. Despite his eccentricities, Alastor is a gentleman and seems like the kind of person Lilith would get along quite well with. Alastor would have respect for Lilith, especially considering his opinions on women and the fact that Lilith left Lucifer in the best interest of her child. Or at least what she believed to be the best interest of her child. See the semi-canon upside-down music video for further context on that. Back when Lilith owning Alastor's soul was a prevalent theory, many suspected that the reason for Alastor's hate towards Lucifer was that Lilith had been talking shit about him to Al. I think this explanation makes even more sense in the light of them being friends instead. Or acquaintances, since, there are no friends in hell other than Nifty. Lilith wouldn't even have to talk badly about Lucy. She might have, but Alastor could have just read between the lines and falsely assumed that Lucifer was like his dad. Anyways, if this was the case, Lilith would obviously notice should Alastor suddenly disappear, and Rosie, whom if you've seen part 1 of this theory, you know as Rue, doesn't feel like picking a fight with the Queen of Hell right now. She probably could do it, but it's not really part of her plan, so she keeps her control low-key. When the exterminations start and Lilith disappears, Rosie seizes the opportunity to get rid of him. She doesn't have any use for him yet, but she doesn't want him to ruin her plans with his usual scheming. His ego probably doesn't help, since according to Amir Talai, Alastor thought he couldn't be harmed before getting his ass kicked by Adam. Rosie might have made him disappear because she didn't want her very useful pet to get himself murdered because he was stupid enough to pick a fight with the big fish. Regardless of the exact reason, though, she keeps an eye on Charlie and the hotel, which isn't hard since she literally has eyes all over hell. She bides her time, keeping note of what Charlie can accomplish, assessing her potential, and when she seems to have reached her lowest point, being humiliated on national television and with no other option than to once again seek advice from her mother, Rosie takes advantage. Seeing Charlie's vulnerability, Rosie brings Alastor into the equation to take advantage of it as Rue sees fit, and the rest is history. My voice hurts. I've been recording since 1 o'clock, by the way, which comes out to like 5 hours of raw footage. Anyways, that's the long and I guess short of it, folks. To recap, Rue took on this Rosie persona in order to gain power and break her chains. At some point, she started keeping tabs on little Princess Morningstar, hoping to manipulate her into serving this goal. Meanwhile, Lilith broke up with Lucifer since she basically had to rule her kingdom solo and wanted to raise her daughter to be a good queen. Sometime afterwards, she developed a friendship with Alastor. Meanwhile, in heaven, Adam got spiteful of her success and him and Sera sent down the extermination. In exchange for the protection of Charlie and the other Hellborn, Lilith had to go to heaven and cut off all contact with Hell. With her out of the way, Rosie makes Alastor disappear until she has use for him. When Charlie hits what looks like rock bottom, she finally sees that use and sends in Alastor to manipulate her. What do we think? Does Lilith actually love Lucifer and Charlie? Am I right about the reasons for the breakup? Why did the exterminations start and how did they lead to her stay in heaven? How does Alastor fit in? With that, thank you all so much for watching. Have a lovely day and come back soon. Bye for now.